So welcome to everyone. And yes, I would just like to introduce our host of the day, Lucy Alderslow, who is working for Permaculture Scotland and is an author of the book on how to talk to children about climate change. She can tell you much more in detail of all the things she has been involved in, but she is actually working on getting children involved into permaculture very intensely. So she's very knowledgeable on the topic. So thank you so much, Lucy, for being available for hosting this talk today. And then I'll just pass straight over to you to introduce yourself. And then perhaps afterwards, I would suggest maybe if everyone could just, since we're a small group, to just introduce yourselves very briefly, you know, who you are, and yeah, just sort of what made you curious to come on this call. Thank you.
Thank you.
And sorry, just one technical word. Is it okay for everyone? Normally we record these sessions, so just to make them available later online for, well, for posterity, really, for the, it's essentially for the members of SCAN, if they want to just replay it and get some knowledge. And they have, yeah, there are always requests, and I've got in requests again for this time, for people to just be able to basically have a replay of the session later on, so that they can look at, you know, review it when they have a moment, because they were unable to join us today. So is that okay for everyone?
Yep, I'm happy.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, Lucy, then over to you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So so Eva had sort of handed this over to me a couple of weeks ago, and she said sort of basically the idea is to sort of go around and hear from each of us. I've got some different sort of questions that I thought we might be able to explore together. As Katerina said, I've written a book about engaging children in permaculture. I also wrote an article specifically about how to talking with children about climate change. So when I saw this coming up, I thought it would be a really interesting webinar to attend, because I'm very interested in the topic. Yeah, so the idea now is just to do a sort of introductions and check-in round. So the check-in, yeah, I'm also introduction. I'm also a permaculture teacher, so I teach the Glasgow permaculture design course every year, and I've been involved in children in permaculture in lots of different ways, including forest schools and like work in the local school during and after school hours, and yeah, gardening and creating various things there, permaculture stuff. And currently I am at home, and yeah, I've also found the video on Zoom a little bit odd. That's me coming out on the video, but I often do these sort of online meetings without that. And there's somebody sleeping who's not feeling very well just behind me.
All right.
So that may affect the call in some way. Yeah, he's a bit poorly. Okay, I'll pass over to Tansy. Yeah, so that's another thing that's useful, if you just say who you're passing to when you finish talking. So I'll pass over to Tansy, and I'll mute.
So I'm Tansy. I work for Transition University of St Andrews. I run a project called Skillshare, but I kind of consider myself to be a climate change educator. So I do a lot of work, you know, in raising kind of the topic around people, and supporting people to find ways of living a low carbon lifestyle. I've got two children, a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old. And I'm really interested in this chat today from a personal perspective, to kind of look at how to support my own children, and then taking that learning out into the community once I've done that piece of work at home. Thank you, and handing over to Helena.
Hello, I'm Helena. I'm sort of tangentially connected to Tansy through Transition. I used to work with Tansy. At the moment, I'm doing some work with Plant in Tayport, doing the carbon conversations there. So we're trying to help people reduce their carbon footprints, you know, through individual action. So I'm talking to people about climate change, and it's also something that I'm just tremendously concerned about and would like to be having useful conversations, and helpful conversations, not just ones that scare the pants off people and make them unable to act. So yeah, I think that's where I'm coming from. I've got 3 kids myself, and obviously I have been talking to them about it, and if I could do that in a way that doesn't make them feel stressed, I would be happy about that too. I find it a very stressful subject as it is, so it's kind of hard to know how to speak to other people about it, I think. Okay, is that enough? Who am I handing over to? Is Rebecca there?
She is in principle, but she says her internet connection is slow. Rebecca, can you speak? Are you still there? You would need to unmute yourself first, though.
You unmute by, there's a little button with a picture like a microphone.
Yeah, it's not
and there's a big
possible
red
to
line
unmute
through
her,
it just now,
unfortunately.
Rebecca.
I can't unmute her. No, it doesn't look like she's able to speak. Okay, then maybe
Rebecca,
I can just...
you could also type if you want.
Yeah.
And I can read it out.
She says she's really sorry because she's really interested in the discussion, but we'll have to duck out before she throws her computer out of the window. So I don't know if she's still online or not. She seems to be connected, but yeah.
Yeah, may not be. Okay.
We'll see if Rebecca comes back on board somehow. But I don't see her.
Do you want to introduce yourself a bit more, Katharina?
Yeah, I can say a few words as well about myself. So yes, hello everyone. My name is Katharina from SCAN. So the Scottish Communities Climate Action Network, which you hopefully all know because you've signed up to this call. And so yeah, I basically do sort of the network engagement, communications, and sort of board support work. I think sort of back end and front end of SCAN. So your first point of contact for pretty much everything SCAN related. And yes, I'm here to host, well, I'm one of the co-hosts of this Tuesdays for Climate series, and together with Eva Schoenfeld, who couldn't make this this call today, unfortunately. And we have this series of just online conversations with members and non-members in this sort of next 12 months, where we basically host monthly conversations on different topics of interest that relate to anything to do with climate action and with what our members hopefully are interested in order to just get to know each other a little bit more, and also hopefully bring people into conversations about topics that they are interested in. So that's the sort of the formal bit from my background. Personally, I am here on this call also to just hear a bit more about getting some practical ideas on how we can talk to children about climate change. We've got a little one in the house, an 8-year-old. Is my stepdaughter, and yeah, she's I would say she's relatively interested in sort of sustainability related questions and all of that. We dragged her along to the last climate demonstration in September as well, which was good. But yeah, I think it would be nice to just exchange a little bit more on how you guys do it, just like sort of have a really down-to-earth conversation about how do you talk to children about all these different topics that are quite untangible. Climate change is very sort of fluffy, up in the air kind of thing, and even for adults it's hard to understand. So or even if they understand it, then at least the next thing to sort of get them to actually do something is not obvious. So I'd really like to hear a little bit from everyone, like how you guys do it in your daily life, maybe also daily work, I don't know. And yeah, let's see what comes out of this. So looking forward to this.
Great, thank you. That's really relates to the first question I thought would be really a good place to start, which is what has been your experience of talking to children about climate change? Yeah, I'm just wondering who would like to go first? Is there anyone who's like wanting to talk to that question already? So I'll write it in the chat because sometimes it's hard to catch up. What has been your experience of talking to children about climate change? What have you been doing?
I don't mind. I don't mind having saying something. I'm sorry. I was just reading the text. Can't do both. I think I have changed it depending on the age of the child that I'm talking to. I've got my oldest is 16. I've got a 13-year-old and a 7-year-old. So the kind of things that I'd be saying to my 16-year-old maybe aren't the same as I'm saying to my 7-year-old. Simply because his worldview is totally different. But I do worry that they're getting anxious about it because it is this big thing that they have so little control over. And I think finding ways, I mean, they are, actually my youngest, he's off for climate striking. Can I hand over to someone else?
Sure.
Thank you, Helena. Thank you for your honesty, because it's a huge topic and it's hugely difficult to imagine how it is for the young people as they grow up and the effect that that's going to have on them.
Maybe I can just share some sort of general thoughts. Thank you, Helena, for starting this conversation. I've been quite amazed whenever I talk to young people, not necessarily smallest children, but even like of all ages, in fact, from really sort of basically the moment they can sort of talk and understand sort of basic things, sort of 5, 6, 7 years old, up to, you know, sort of the young generations of the university students, which is of course a bit older already, grown-ups. I don't know, probably can't really define them as children anymore, but I'm quite amazed how conscious a lot of them are about these issues, you know. And like our little one, having been at school, there was change works there, and for them talking about zero waste and, you know, how they can avoid waste and how they can recycle and that topic. They really seem to get it, and they seem to be really interested in it, and I'm really heartened and really encouraged by that, because I just feel like, oh, okay, maybe this is what we need, you know, that we really need to, that we get a good mass of young people, not this old fossil generation, literally, you know, in all senses of the term, that has never been sensitized to the topic. And maybe we really need that young generation to take control of things and just lead us rather than us, you know, trying to lead them. Because I just feel that there's so much more, it's so much more natural to them to want to do something positive and to want to to be involved and to be active in sort of anything related to climate activities. So I've just been really amazed at how conscious young people are in general. So that's encouraging for me.
Thank you. Tansy?
So I kind of have lots of different audiences, young audiences that I work with. So I'm a beaver leader with the Cub Scouts, and I also go into our local primary school and do some sessions over time. So I get the luxury of going in, you know, 1, 2 or 3 times in a row, and so building up the messages. And then also I'm a mum, so I'm kind of very much with Helena in her emotions and her kind of the realizations that we're having as parents. And I also work with students, you know, and a lot of them are sustainable development students, so they're very, very engaged. very forward thinking and very proactive, which, you know, I find really heartening. And I also work with kind of the more general population. So I work with our kind of local churches, and we've done quite a lot of work with Quakers and done quite a lot of climate conversations, which is a kind of a very light carbon conversation, which seems to be a really, really effective tool for just starting that conversation with people. The way that I'm finding that works the best at the moment with the very young children is I'm not tending to go down the disaster route at all. So I'm not really asking them to think about the future at all, because, you know, for some of the very young children, they're just not in that place yet. And instead, I'm much more focusing on good husbandry, on looking after the planet, and that should just be what we do, irrespective of climate change. It's just a habit that we're building, is that we think about all the different aspects of how to reduce our impact. And that seems to be quite an easy route in, because they're able to see that the planet obviously is important. There's only one of them, but they're not yet being traumatized by the possibilities and the concerns that we've got. So it just seems to be like instilling kind of just a good husbandry attitude into the young people. I have tried talking to my older child about it, but about climate change as a real issue, but, you know, neither of my children are ready to engage. They can't see beyond themselves at the moment, really. So it's a hard one.
So did you say they were like, how old did you say they were?
So I've got a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old.
7 and 9.
But my 9-year-old is autistic. So he has a different perception of the world. My 7-year-old, actually, Helena has a lot to do with, because he does quite a lot of kind of gardening club and so on that Helena has a part to play in, and he is much more engaged and aware, but they haven't had the dawning that I think we all worry about our children having, that moment when they realise that actually the world isn't as safe and secure as they think it is. And I think there's a fracturing moment that I think as adults I certainly have had, that moment of realisation that what is at the moment may well not be the same forever, and that fracturing moment is a very important moment. When I'm working with students and with local people, I actually gently bring that fracturing moment forwards. So I encourage them to think about how old their children or grandchildren or they will be in 2050, and just get them to do that calculation. And when they realise that my children will be in their 30s in 2050, and they will be kind of in their 20s, that suddenly climate change becomes a lot more real, a lot more current, and the urgency is suddenly present. And I do use that in groups that I feel aren't that engaged yet. And I don't terrify them with it, but I certainly encourage them to start putting it into perspective and start getting a timeline for themselves as individuals and for their family. And that is very helpful for people who aren't yet fully engaged, because I think climate change for me felt like it was going to happen in 2050, which has always been a very, very long time away, and then suddenly it's not. Suddenly it's actually not far away at all. And I think that's quite a useful motivator if it's used very carefully with people, but not with young children.
Yeah,
I feel like I've said a lot.
Thanks, Tansy. I would agree with you with what you're saying, Tansy, that it's really important to know the child as an individual and to talk to them for where they're at and what they're interested in and where they're when they're ready. I've got 2 children as well who are 12 and 14 now, and one is very interested and engaged in, well, interested in the environment, you know, has got a sort of deep sense of nature connection. And, you know, both of them went on the climate march in September. They're both in high school now. Yeah, I think that the older one like genuinely cares, and the younger one may have been going because he thought it was the thing to do. He's looking more to his peers than to the likes of me in terms of actually taking action or anything. I think that, yeah, when we're choosing, just what you said, Helena, as well, like you would speak to a 16-year-old very differently to someone who's 7 or 9, you know. That's really important. I know of a project near here where they're, you know, hitting children with quite the hard facts. They're quite young children that could actually have the opposite effect. Have you, any of you read the book by David Sobel called Beyond Ecophobia? Yeah.
No, I've not even heard of that one.
Oh, it's really good. So the last line of the book I quoted for years. It's a little book, quite easy to read. But the last line I've actually been quoting for years, and I hadn't actually read the entire book until quite recently. So the last line is, if we want children to flourish, to be truly empowered, we must first allow them to love the earth before we ask them to save it.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And, the point is with those little ones, like I think, you know, the primary school and kindergarten age, you know, actually just spending time in nature and enjoying the awe and the beauty of nature is what's important.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and yeah, only, you know, as and when it's not that you know, ban the topic of climate change in the room in front of them. You know, they'll hear the words, they'll hear the phrases, they'll hear the conversations, but they're not directed at them and forced to actually try and engage with it until they're emotionally ready for that. In David Sobel's book, he talks about, in Germany a while ago, they did a sort of mass experiment, accidentally perhaps, but within the schooling, they thought, right, let's teach all the children how bad people have been about recycling, and therefore, you know, like, and all the problems that our behavior has caused. And what happened was, all the children, they desensitized. So it had the opposite to the greening effect that they expected. In fact, all the children that were spoken to about it that were just too young, then kind of just start to completely ignore all the sort of environmental messages. They just weren't ready to take it at that time, and therefore they sort of shuttered that section of their brains and were never really able to engage with it. Yeah. Oh yeah, Catherine's put the link there. It's a really good book. And I think that the learning from that is really important.
I think that's a really good point you're making there, Lucy, because that I was just thinking about the same thing actually. From what I see from our little one is that she's not, I would say, naturally inclined to be, you know, eco-conscious or any of that sort. She's quite a, I don't know if the word is normal, but like quite an average sort of city girl child, you know, with whatever, give me presents, give me games, give me whatever. But I do see, because both her dad and myself are very active professionally, we work in, you know, in the area of sustainability and climate change, renewable energy, you know, and that all of these topics, that, you know, we do bring her a lot of information and awareness on these topics, that it is in fact important, and we're trying to do it in a way that it doesn't scare her off, but we're trying to make it positive. Like, we have this little allotment that we go to, and we just try and take her along to it without forcing her to actually do something in it, but just for her to be there and just be out there and touch the soil if she wants to, put some seeds in if she wants to, and if she doesn't, that's fine as well. So we've really like tried to not force her to do anything on that little plot, because she's not really, initially she likes to stay clean, and you know, she doesn't want to get too dirty and all, but us just seeing us that we are getting dirty, we're getting our hands dirty, we're getting in there and all, actually I noticed that when she sees that, that's when she wants it as well. And that's when she goes like, oh, actually, can I dig a bit of soil up with you? And can I do a little bit of sowing with you? And then, you know, some other times there were some other children there, and then they were all excited about watering the whole patch. And then suddenly she was interested in watering as well, because the other children were interested in watering. And so they were all running with the watering cans, you know, just to fill it up again and to water it. So I think it's really about taking it in a playful way and in a concrete way, because, you know, even though this is of course not climate change per se, but I think just to nurture that awareness of everything being interconnected, and you know that it's, you know, not good to sort of, you know, create too much rubbish or even buy too much stuff, and you know, all these things, we're trying to make her aware of that. And I do see that now after a few years of, yeah, probably you could call it indoctrination on our side on these topics. I do see that she's becoming more sensitive and more responsive to it. And she does put the rubbish into the recycling now, and she, you know, she does think twice about perhaps not getting all the toys that she wants. If we say, well, you know, is that really necessary? You know, of like even drawing on paper on both sides rather than on just one side. You know, these little things that are sort of something that are real in her little world, you know, because she loves drawing. So a piece of paper that is being thrown away, and another, you know, tree that has to be cut for that, that is something she can understand somehow. You know, it's more concrete than saying, oh, climate change, you know, that big evil thing, or that, you know, that thing that might destroy our world, our planet. I think that's too big and too abstract. So we're trying to do it in a sort of positive and
it's too scary.
Yeah. Sorry?
It's too scary as well.
Yeah.
You know, there are children who have been really traumatized by being told things like that the world's going to end, even though it's going to happen light years away when the planet hits us, you know, with solar systems billions of years away, let alone something that is actually going to affect something that, well, we don't know what's going to happen within their lifetimes, within our own lifetimes.
I did speak to a friend's daughter the other day who thought that the 10-year thing was the end of the world. She'd obviously misheard the messaging, and I was so glad to actually have had that conversation with her, because she said something about, oh well, I don't have to worry about that, you know, talking about the future, because there's only 10 years or there's only 12 years left. And it was just a throwaway comment. And obviously she's been taking in stuff from I don't know, the news, or half hearing things on the radio, but not getting the full information. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's really important to talk to the kids about these things, just so that they know the true state of affairs, rather than, I mean, you know, I explained that, you know, we need to cut down our emissions in 10 years by half. And she was like, oh, and that gave a whole different spin to what she was thinking. And I do think that's why it's so important to talk, obviously, to the kids, because I think there's so much information floating around that they need to know what is the truth, or as far as we know it, the best information.
Yeah. How old is she?
She would have been primary 7, so
Okay.
what, 11, 12, 11,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, because I was just thinking, what age, it might be useful just to hear, what age or stage do you think it is appropriate to talk to a child about climate change?
I think you can talk about it, but without it being talking about all the consequences. Because, like I say, I've talked to my 7-year-old about, he knows about climate change. I mean, he couldn't not living in the house that we live in, and, you know, making the choices that we make, and they understand that we, you know, we make choices because it's better for the planet. But again, it's the way of framing it. I think the older they get, the more they can understand the consequences. I mean, they can use it as a phrase that doesn't necessarily mean anything until they learn more and more. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So do you, Helena, do you
I
keep it
guess
at the general climate change level then, or like sort of really just try and explain the concept of, you know, the emissions and how they need to be reduced, and where they come from and all of that, or do you talk about other stuff as well?
It's well, I suppose it's a bit like the permaculture earth care concept, I suppose, because it's about litter. It's about, I mean, my little actually my middle son, when he was 12, he asked for litter pickers for his Christmas, and we all go out and do litter picking, and that's a nice kind of just benefit for the environment. And I think that's a nice way of engaging younger ones as well, because you're just making things better for them, and it gives you that idea of looking after the environment and talking about, oh well, you know, bugs won't get caught, and you know, shrews won't get stuck in a bottle, and you can think about other bits of the environment as well, and other things that are all interrelated.
Yeah. I think that's, yeah, that we're all kind of agreeing there that it's really useful to spend that time doing those sort of pro-environmental things. Yeah, from an early age. But
Yeah.
that for them, you know, to understand how bad climate change could be.
You're asking what age you talk?
Yeah. Well, I just think that that's something that's much more scary.
I think in the local high school in Madras, in S5, which is 16, they have somebody come in and tell them pretty much just as it is. And I think that might be due for my eldest daughter sometime soon. And I don't know if that is the right, and that maybe is the right way to pitch it, but I do think it. Something I would love to see is, you know, the UN climate accredited teacher COPD that's around at the moment. I think if they had someone in the school that was teaching them at the right level, who knew what level to be pitching it at for the different like primary groups. So it's a bit like the sex education. You don't really tell them about sex the first time, but you sort of start introducing the concepts, and then you build on it each time you come back to it. And so it's not this like all of a sudden everything's fine and then all of a sudden it's not. So you get that kind of gradual informational build up.
I think it is interesting because actually when you talked about sex education there, but I was thinking with the same subject, health and well-being, they're being given, they're quite young, certainly in S1, possibly in primary school, they're being shown drugs. They're like, you know, fake versions of actual like class A drugs.
Oh, really?
Children are, yeah, at our school, I guess it's across our region anyway, we're in Dumfries and Galloway. Yeah, like, and I had no idea that, you know, if it was true. Even when I was 16, I didn't really believe in it. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how that's actually got a lot younger than when I was a child as well, sex education. And they obviously think that children are ready for it, for understanding different aspects of it at quite a young age.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. To me, I feel like climate change should be like reading and writing. It should be embedded throughout the curriculum.
Absolutely.
From secondary age, like every child should know the basic scientific facts of what's happened so far, even if it's not going into the future. But like right through their science, it should be really clear what's, in terms of biology, what's happened, and in terms of physics, what are the technological solutions, you know, that we can put in place, you know, saving energy and so on, that are already in place, that are already exist, that we could be utilizing more. And, you know, you could, through it, like, it's so relevant to all science, it should just be involved right through. Certainly our high school, the kids, my kids go to, they do no outdoor learning. My two children, neither of them do any outdoor learning within school hours. And yeah, it's it's like, so there's the lack of the nature connection, and then there's the lack of education. That there are children in Robin's class, he's S3, doing the protest that they did, and they either in S3 didn't know what climate change was, or that they could do something about it themselves. So to me, the education system is really failing them massively. Yeah.
No, I do think that if we could have it embedded in the school system, then if everyone would have, you wouldn't be relying on your parents knowing about it to tell you about it. You know, my 7-year-old again is apparently pestering his friends to eat the vegetarian options because that's better for the environment. And this child, I've heard this from that child, the other child's mum, who is apparently been told that they can't buy, you know, if they buy another car, it's got to be electric. So, I mean, you're getting pester power, but you could equally be getting negative pester power, saying that it doesn't matter. You know, at least if you've got some common playing field, I suppose, bad analogy, but, you know, everyone would be getting the same information, and what they did with it would be, you know, at least consistent, or not consistent what they did with it, but they would have the basis to work from.
Yeah. What do you think, Tansy? You've been quiet for a little while now.
I've had me on mute because there's a lot of background noise where I am. I'm in a corridor. No, I'm listening. I really do agree that it should be embedded, as you say, because if it starts off slowly with just more and more information, and the information is given in a way that is empowering, and so that, you know, again, I go back to the concept of good stewardship, really, and good husbandry. So if we are prepared to look after our planet because that's just what you do, and you have the information about, you know, why we should do it, but not, as you say, the kind of the end game story, then it just becomes infused into the whole system. And then when the child is ready, they'll start to take on board actually the urgency that we're, you know, I'm a little bit afraid to communicate to my children. So it just becomes part of what we do. So I'm really, yeah.
Can I ask, like, from a, sorry, didn't mean to cut you, Tansy. Can I ask from a technical point of view, because I'm not very familiar with the Scottish school system, and I'm really just seeing what basically, you know, through my stepdaughter, what's, you know, what she's learning in her school, and she's only in P4 now, so I've only got experience from P1 to P4 at the moment. So I don't know, what's your individual experience, or do you know of, you know, do you know of the Scottish school system, and like, how does it work? Is there some kind of at least repetitive uptake of the topic somewhere, or is it totally based on the individual teacher or in the individual school? Like, how is the topic even addressed in the system as a whole at the moment?
I don't think it is, unless you've got a teacher who's particularly motivated by it. I know the school in the next village along had a sustainability topic, but the primary school that my kids went to, they went through the entire primary, like their primary 1 to 7, without covering sustainability. They might have done things like power, or, you know, electricity, or something that might have been able to be touched on, but I really don't think it was, you know, renewables weren't particularly mentioned in the context of climate change or reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
I have a similar thing. We've got to P5 now. My oldest is in P5, and I know that the only input that both my children have had around climate change is when I've gone into the school and kind of offered to do some work on the topic. So they've certainly not come home with any information that suggests that they're starting to learn about it at school. So, you know, which is really worrying, because I mean, that means that they're getting to 9 years old and haven't got those basics.
So is that during STEM week as well, or is that another context?
Pardon?
Is that during STEM week that you volunteer to go in, Tansy, or is that just a general volunteering?
No, we've got an eco teacher in our school, and she's invited me into the P1 and P2 classes, just to do the very basics, the very beginning of it. But I've not been invited to come into the end of the older classes. So that as Hannah says, it's very dependent on the teacher's own interests, really.
So my partner was invited for STEM week because he's an engineer, so he talked about renewable energy during that week, and yeah, the kids, they loved it. They were like, oh, they were all asking questions and super keen apparently. So he really enjoyed it as well, because yeah, it's just, he said it was really rewarding for him to just go in there and just share his passion, with all these young kids who were like, I think there were 7 at the time. So because he did the P3s last year. Yeah, the P3. So they were only 7 and they were super keen.
Yeah, no, the children are hungry for it. I mean, in our school, we've got a whole range of children who are very passionate about the issue. They're very switched on to it. Parents have come to me to say, how can they support their children with the trauma associated with climate change, and so there's a huge hunger and a need. It's really about how we meet that in a constructive way. But certainly the parents, a lot of children are coming out for the climate strikes on Friday, and there's been some call for the school to mark the other Friday in an inclusive way. So rather than striking, making it the day when there's some reflection done in the school. So, and I think what I'm taking for this conversation so far is I hadn't clocked that it wasn't part of the syllabus. I thought that at some point soon it just sort of happens.
It appears not to be.
It doesn't sound so. It sounds like actually parents, we need to be putting more input into our schools to ensure that it becomes part of the curriculum, even if it's only in our school.
It needs to be part of the curriculum across the country, though. And
yes, that's the next.
A massive. I've seen somewhere, maybe in Facebook land or something, like a call for people saying climate change needs to be on the curriculum. And I think it would require people in the same way as sex education is on the curriculum, that children at this age, this is appropriate, at that age, that's appropriate. And I think there has been some massive leaps in the last sort of 15 years in terms of outdoor learning. I know over the next year as well, for the little ones, just basing with where I said earlier about the need for children just to love nature. And that's where it needs to start from. And those children, as those are nursery children now, even their primary school teacher children now that have been at nursery. There's also a campaign for every child to have an hour every day of nature connect, or like of time with a teacher outdoors in a natural environment, which I think is worthwhile.
I think part of the Paris Agreement is that there should be provision in schools to teach about climate change. I think I want to say Article 12 in the Paris Agreement was that it should be done, and I don't think many countries, if any, are actually managing to meet that target.
Yeah, I think it would be good for SCAN, Katerina, to look into this and actually join together people from lots of different organisations who all can get behind the point of the need to have climate change on, because I know that Permaculture Association would also be behind it, to get behind a campaign for getting climate change as a single thing on the curriculum for excellence.
Okay, can I just sorry, can I just come back to something from before? I think the one thing that I find that we have to be really careful not to do is to say that we need to leave it to the children, to fix. I think we have to be doing that role model thing and showing them that we are making changes maybe in our own lifestyles because they can see that, and maybe explaining why, you know, like we choose to do whatever, or they're not going to get that toy, or, you know, whatever the actual choice is, maybe trying to embed it a little bit in the reason. Yeah, I think that's something that if the children are hearing, you know, it's going to be up to you to save us, I think that's the pressure on them is going to be even worse.
So they're not in positions of power.
No.
They're not able to change, you know, government policy. When they're like teenagers, you know, I don't know what you were like when you were a teenager, but I certainly wasn't in any way interested in doing anything. Like
I wrote to Margaret Thatcher about nuclear weapons, actually.
Did you?
Yes. Nothing changes.
Yeah. You wrote, but in terms of your power, were you actually able to do anything?
No.
Yeah.
But I also think there's something there around going back to age as well, is that the primary school children are very impressionable, they're very open-minded and very interested and keen. And we need to get the message in during that stage, even though they haven't got the power, but they have got the open-mindedness, so that when they move into teenagehood, you know, some of them will remain passionate and some of them will hopefully just have the information at the back of their minds, but we don't need to be struggling against adolescence while we're educating them because they've already had it in primary school. It feels like it's a really important window into a young person's mind is at this primary school age.
That's a good point. Can I just, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's Deborah who has joined us as well. So maybe just if we can give her a moment to say hello to us as well. And if you have any thoughts on what you've heard so far, but if you don't, that's fine. But maybe just to say hello. Can you?
How do I say that? Hi, I'm in Burnfoot and we have a wonderful hub here that supports all the children and the community. It started about nearly 2 years ago that we really got Burnfoot Grows Together involved, and it's about educating the children, and we're very much involved with the primary school that's right next door to us almost. And we've seen a huge change in the children's attitudes, particularly towards food. They will try anything, they will eat anything, and they are really looking at climate change, which is amazing, particularly some of these children are only like 4 and 5. And we've had such a huge success, thankfully, to Gordy, who actually is in charge of Burnfoot Grows Together. And it is wonderful to hear other people trying to encourage children to get involved. They've just had two of our schools are doing a pilot scheme to try and get the mums to do more food waste recycling. So we're really, really interested in all this here. I totally forgot this was on because I'm trying to get over chicken pox today. I'm loving listening to what you're all saying, and I totally agree with everything you're saying. You can't put the responsibility on the children, but example is what leads you onwards. So thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Deborah.
Thank you. So I'm not sure, I think we're finishing at 2. Is that what time other people think we're finishing? Or what time do you need to go, Helena?
I'm not sure. I've got, I could stay a bit longer. I've got school pickup, but not for a bit.
Okay. Tansy?
I can stay. I can stay a little bit longer. Yeah, I mean, I had it booked to my diary till 2:30, but I've got school pickup as well, so I kind of, yeah, I'm happy to spend the time it needs, but also need to go as well.
Yeah, it was originally booked till 2:30, but I think we can take it flexibly.
So should we go till 2:15 then? Is that a compromise? Okay.
That would work for me.
Perfect. Okay. Perfect for me.
Yeah. Okay, great. So another question I thought that would be useful is, what resources have you come across that are useful for talking to children about climate change? I mentioned David Sabell's book there, And I mentioned that article that I wrote about, specifically about talking to children about climate change. Is that been put on the blog, Katerina?
We'll put it out after this call.
Okay.
There was links in the event page. Was that one of?
On the Eventbrite, yeah, there's also.
Yeah. But I think, do you know, the one that I've been most inspired by lately is Rob Hopkins' What If?
What if becomes what if? No, what if?
Yeah.
What
What is becomes what if? Yeah. And found a talk on YouTube, basically him giving a talk of his book, and that's just, you know, showing all the best practice that's going on around the world, and it is a lovely way of just showing the kids, because I watched it with my older two, and just sort of like saying, look, you know, it's happening.
Your positive solutions.
Mm-hmm. And I think focusing on the positive is super important. You've got to give people something to aim for, not just to avoid.
What about you, Tansy?
So yeah, I have let the children watch some of Greta's videos, and I've watched them first and then let the kids watch them, and they've been really, when I say upbeat, I don't mean that the message is upbeat, but the energy in the videos is quite energizing and quite attractive, and they look kind of like pop videos, some of them, and the kids have kind of watched them, and you can see that they've been quite enlivened by watching some of Greta's stuff. Obviously there's some stuff in there that's a bit too hardcore, and I've come up with quite a lot of resources myself for working with the beavers. So we've done quite a lot of different exercises and things which the kids have really enjoyed doing. So I'd be happy to kind of write those out and share them with people. But yeah, lots of play with the young children. What I've been using, but I've not had access to any resources that I would love to.
Deborah, would you like to share anything?
Can't hear. Are you talking to me? I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, Deborah.
Yeah, I totally agree on the play. We have a game that we actually set up for the kids, and it was showing them like the distance food was travelling, about packaging, all sorts of things like this to do with food waste and the environment, and it was done with snakes and ladders, and it's on the floor, a huge one that we made on the floor, and the children remember that because it's fun and it's something that they enjoy doing. It sticks in the memories. A class of P1s were told they were going to go to the hub, and you expect the kids to say, oh, that's where the cafe is and the soft play. No, they tell you that's where you can get carrots from. So it shows because we've got a huge food share as well that we do. Our local supermarkets are really, really supportive of the food share. So it shows that playing with the children and showing them in that way and getting them involved, it's like when you're in the kitchen, if you're peeling the veg, if you're talking to them about where you're going to put it and what happens to it, that works as well. It's all about copying what mum does. And for me, it's Nana, but it's copying, isn't it? And getting involved in a fun way. And they remember.
Thank you. Just funny you mentioned the snakes and ladders game. I made a snakes and ladders game about 10 years ago that sounds like the same. It was like, yeah, something that you would stand on, and it was for at events, and you know, it was like just how to be eco, you know. Like the snakes were, I remember that the last one was you go on a plane, go back to the start.
Yeah.
Another one, another snake was like you leave the fridge door open, but there was ladders like you walk to school.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can actually do with these kids, to just simple little things, isn't it? You know, if you first explain to a young child about how much energy a plane uses and what's happening, it goes over their head.
Yeah.
But if you do it in a fun way,
Yeah.
and they know they're learning, and they think, oh no, I'm going to go down that ladder or down that snake.
That snake, yeah.
They remember it, and then they
Yeah.
tell others. It's like the smoking, wasn't it? About trying to get the kids to tell their mums and dads not to smoke in front of them, and it started to work. And look where we are now. You can't smoke in public places and in your car. So I think, yeah, you're right. It's definitely getting them while they're young and making it fun.
So this, can you see in the thing, this is the book that I wrote. In it, we've got about 400 different activities that you can do that are sort of permaculture activities to do with kids. And one of the session plans, which is this one, can you see it? One of the sessions plans is called Mind the Food. And it's actually quite, and it was related to what you said there, Deborah, as well, which made me think about it. It's basically, a whole session where you can go, that children go shopping and look at the different packaging and read it and think about which is the most environmentally example of, a particular, so they all have to prepare a meal afterwards. So they go to the shops first of all, and then they discuss how eco it is, So it's quite a useful activity to do because the kids get to eat. there's the motivation.
Yeah.
So they get to eat, but they also talk about healthcare, people care, fair share, the permaculture ethics, like right through. This is the best example of earth care, and they learn all about it through this quite practical example of something that they do regularly, probably anyway, as in going to the shop and buying resources that they cook with. Yeah, look, there's an appendix, so that there's like a handout for the children. You can photocopy the handout, and then the children would have on each item we bought, the country it comes from, reasons for choice, so how far it travelled, what type of packaging it has, just so that the children can get into thinking about that. Sorry, Tansy?
I'm interrupting you, I apologise.
Okay, so there's also on our childreninpermaculture.com, the website, it's got 800 different activities that you can do on it. Got songs and such, like songs about compost and things that could be all really useful for you.
Did you say on permaculture.com, or on which website?
It's children, I'll type it in here, childreninpermaculture.
Children permaculture. Children in permaculture.
Yeah, that's something else that we did within the project. The first thing we did was we looked at 316 different resources that are like websites and books and all that, more generally about permaculture rather than specifically about climate change. And then we sort of read them and categorized them and filtered them. And on the website, you can find a catalogue of resources, which has got 140 different resources that could be useful for you. I'm just trying to find that link for you. It's on childreninpermaculture.com, and then you go to our materials, and then you go to catalogue of resources. And they're not all necessarily specifically about climate change, but they are all about sustainability, if you like. So permaculture in terms of earth care, people care, fair share. But actually the top ones of the list is the climate kids. I'll send you that link right there, and you can see it whilst we're chatting. That's by NASA. Yeah, storytelling. Storytelling is another fantastic way to see children, because it's something that they can understand. So good stories can really help.
I think leading by example is probably the strongest resource there is, really, because if you basically walk the talk, then children are so much more likely to just imitate you, because they literally just copy anything you do and say, especially if they're younger. I mean, once they get to teenagehood, that may change, but at least when they're still younger, I just see that. I mean, our little one is just like a copy paste of what we do and say. And I recognize myself so many times in what she does and says. She sometimes literally stands next to me and does the same thing just to copy what I'm doing, whether that is cooking something or the way I'm getting dressed or whatever, so it's really going very into happening in a lot of areas. So I think just sort of basically doing it, and you don't even have to talk about it in many instances. It's really just sometimes doing it, and doing it regularly, certain things, like whatever it may be, doing your recycling, or taking the bike instead of taking your car, or whatever, just showing them that it's not just something that should be done, but actually doing it.
Yeah, and that, I totally agree in terms of parenting. But it's also useful to have relevant stories and songs that you can read to children to help them to understand.
Also, if it's not your own child, if you're talking to someone else's child, and then maybe you might be their only contact to someone who's sustainable. I think that can be an interesting situation as well, because you're kind of having to, if they have got a song that they can refer back to, that would be nice for them to have.
Absolutely. Sorry, I didn't mean to dismiss any of what you guys
No,
were saying.
no, not at all.
But I totally agree. Yeah, I mean, games. Children are always up for games and sort of doing activities that they can get their hands on. I think Snakes and Ladders is a great example. That's a very popular game, isn't it? Here, so it's something that any child will know. So to infuse that with some climate change related ideas, I think is a great idea.
Yeah, and it's also, it's fun playing games with kids at home as well as in schools and other situations. And there's a big difference between the likes of Catan or Monopoly or Risk and, more environmentally friendly kinds of concepts and games. So it's nice to have both. Tansy's asked an interesting question. You want to say it out loud?
I have to unmute myself to talk. Just wondering, I really enjoy storytelling to my kids, like making my own stories up. But I feel around this issue that I probably need a little bit of inspiration. I'm wondering whether there are any books for kind of the 7, 8, 9 age groups, and not just the beautiful picture books that I'm sure we can get for young children, but older books, and then I guess even for teenager children as well.
I've heard about The Tantrum That Changed the World, but I've not read it. And I think that's about climate striking and sort of saying you can stand up and do something yourself. But it's only one I've heard of. I've not read it.
I think it's an interesting question. I'm like looking through the catalogue there, thinking if I can think of something.
It would be nice if there was a whole, I mean, if you look at climate justice, it would be nice if there was a whole range of stories. So kind of the UK, over consuming, and then some children in another country who are, really suffering from the results of climate change. And it would be a really interesting international book that we bring people together.
Tansy, there might be something soon. Daisy's involved at the secondary school. There is, I think it's called Fourth Generation, and it's about taking stories that have come, like transcripts from refugees, climate refugees, and asking the S5s, I think it is again, because that's the age my daughter is, if they can rewrite the stories, but like as a story, but based on the truth of the individual's actual situation, which is a nice way of getting the kids involved but then also the idea would be to get the stories out further.
Brilliant. That sounds really good.
But
Good.
it's just started.
Yeah, I think I've heard Katrina talking about it. Yeah, Casca talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also really love, you know, some energy to be put into the Snakes and Ladders again, to see whether that could be made into something that could be marketed. Because I think if it was a schools game that we could, you know, take into schools and get, you know, somehow make that come alive in the schools, that would be a really wonderful result.
Okay, I've got that. A copy of that one just somewhere around here. Oh, I gave it to someone, or left it somewhere. I think I accidentally left it in London.
Oops.
My friend's house. Oh well. Yeah, it would be possible. I do know someone who makes games, actually. I once gave the Snakes and Ladders game to someone who was at that time a child of 8 or 9, and he said it was better than all the eco games that they had, the other ones. Something about the simplicity of it. Yeah, definitely. And also it's a very available format that they're used to, but they're just not used to the different outcomes in it. Mm-hmm.
I know at Waterstones they have a few. I saw a few books. Like I think it was around when there was the climate march. They jumped on the bandwagon, and I remember them putting up a few books around that. I know about plastics. There was definitely one about plastics, and I was just looking now. There's also one that's called Earth Heroes. I don't know about the quality of these books, but I know they have some. So I don't know, might be worth just popping into a bookshop and seeing if there could be anything interesting. But if any of you find anything after this call, might be interesting to share that as well, because it'd be great indeed to have this kind of resource, you know, available. Because yeah, as you rightly say, Tansy, you know, I mean, it's sometimes just about having something concrete, you know, like a little story to tell or a game to play. So this is really great to share this kind of resource. We'll also share again the articles and the videos that we had on the original invite for this webinar. So I'll try and put that all together and do a send out to you guys so that you have those in one place, including the comments and the links that we were just talking about today. So that's really helpful, yeah, to have some kind of access to different resources. So thank you so much for sharing those, everyone.
Right. That's great, thank you. Yeah, I did have other questions, but I think that we said we would finish at 15:15, so it might be nice just to finish with a sort of check out, where people can just sort of say, you know, how you found the conversation and any closing thoughts that you might have. Who would like to go first?
I'll happily go first. So the thing that I've really taken from this call is a heartening one, in that you know, I do a lot of nature connection with my kids, as does Helena, and so the understanding that actually that really isn't just nature connection, but it's actually a preparation for beginning the journey of understanding climate change, really gives me a feeling that I might be doing the right thing, rather than that slightly powerless, getting it wrong feeling that, you know, I think all mothers sometimes experience. So I feel like I can put a lot more energy into that, knowing that there's another agenda behind it that feels really, yeah, hopeful. So I found that really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I can go next if you don't mind. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
Yeah. For me, listening to you all, I actually volunteer for about 4 different organisations just here between the school and the hub, and it's all involved with the environment. It's given me really good ideas for our homework club. We do sometimes bring Burnfoot Grows together into the school at the homework club, and we do play games with the things and the other. But it was the books. I'd actually been a bookaholic. I'd missed that idea of actually looking for books for climate change. So that is really something that I really want to look into. I actually know a couple of authors that write children's books. So I'm going to actually approach them. Damien Harvey is actually, he comes to Burnfoot School a lot. So it would be nice to see them getting involved in this, because I think the kids, they already know some of these authors, and if they've already know the authors, they're going to read his books. And I think that is something to really go forward with. You know, I know he's due soon for another visit, and I think that would be incredible to get the book side of it, because that's something that the parents are being taught again, isn't it? Parents have lost out on the sitting down and reading with their children, and they're now coming back to doing that. We've got nursery rhyme this week, and they're having to teach the mums the nursery rhyme so they can teach the children. So I think if we can get the reading going right, they know the authors, and get the authors involved, I think it's an incredible thing. I really do. And I've absolutely loved listening to you, because you're all on the same thought wave as me.
Great, thank you, Deborah. Helena, do you want to go next?
Yeah, it's always lovely speaking to people like Deborah just said, with the same kind of, I guess, the values, and seeming to be in the same headspace about climate change, because it does, you know, there's that everyday dissonance that you have when you're walking around and talking to your friends who are telling you that they're going to go off to Thailand for Christmas or whatever, you know, they're going to do, and you just realize that they have, you know, a totally different worldview from you. So it's lovely sharing ideas with people that are coming from the same place. I do appreciate that.
I'll go next, and maybe Katerina will close. So yeah, I've spotted that Rob Hopkins has written a new book, but I haven't looked at it. So that's nice to see that there's YouTube videos, because I find them quite accessible, and also accessible to share with the kids that love any opportunity where mum says that they can have screen time. Talking of which, I was thinking, it just occurred to me, there's some climate change related films, one where the whole world gets cold and then the only survivors are on like a perpetual chain journey. I can't remember the name of it, but I'm sure my children will tell you when they get home. They're very good at remembering these things. Yeah, so that's just something else. So yeah, so it's great to connect with you and to talk and to listen, and look forward to looking up some of those resources that we talked about. It's really helpful.
I've remembered another film that might be for older, but like 12-year-old older, not necessarily 16, is the Demain, the Tomorrow. It was it's subtitled, and that's like another one which is just showing you all the kind of possible futures that we could have if we you know, did all the things that were available to us now. And that I found that quite inspiring as well. Again, it's seeing the positives. But I think that's the only one I've got in my head just now.
That's a really good film, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Better than Age of Stupid.
I've not seen that.
Then I think I'm the last one to wrap up here. For me, it's been really interesting to, well, I suppose to sort of hone in on that message of climate change should actually be on the curriculum in school, and that it's not. I'm quite shocked to find out that it's not a standard, at least topic theme somewhere. So yeah, I suppose I'm trying to think of ways of it sort of makes me think that we need to think of ways of how we can create more of a generalized front almost on getting that message consistently into the program, whether that is through volunteer engagement, like what Tansy you've been doing as well, or whether that is through actually getting it into the full curriculum as a sort of obligatory topic. So that's been really interesting for me to think about and talk about with you as well. Besides the resource, of course, that's really interesting always to know where you can go next for more info and how you can take it forward. So yeah, it makes me think whether it would be useful to even sort of try and have a kind of project around this or some campaign, I'm not sure, to just get the topic more on the agenda of children education in general That seems to be something that is not generalized. And actually, Scotland being such a or at least it likes to think of itself as a forward-looking nation in terms of climate change. It's actually, I'm quite surprised about all of this, that it's not on in the national curriculum. So yes, I probably need to do a bit of thinking around that. And if any of you have any sort of ideas of how we can take it forward to make it more of a generalized introduction into the school system, I'd be very interested to hear about that.
Yeah,
so,
I would be really interested in that conversation.
So maybe we can organize like a follow-up call or of the like on this kind of activity and see if we can come up with a nice idea. But yes, it does seem to me like it's an important topic to address, because this is the next generation we're talking about, and they are the ones that are going to be the adults of tomorrow. And so there is definitely a lot of value in trying to address these issues sooner rather than later, and at a younger age rather than at a later age, because they're just so much more attractive as well, aren't they, when they're young?
Yeah.
If it becomes normal,
I think
you mean to make
a clarity on what's appropriate at different ages from really skilled pedagogues. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Lovely. Thank you. We'll leave that in your hands, Catherine, just to organise something, or you can contact us.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining the call today. It's been really good talking to you very openly and very personally. I like that. Normally it feels much more professional. I felt like this was more of a personal exchange. So that's really nice. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Thank you so much, Lucy, for hosting this and for leading us through this event. It's been really good to have you there, and I can see we'll definitely need to have some follow-up conversations after this to see what else we can do. But there seems to be a lot of knowledge and experience already here in this virtual room, and it'd be great to tap into that and help spread the knowledge and the practice as well. So yes, thanks so much, ladies. It's been good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On the next call or another time around this topic or any other ones.
Yeah,
Lovely.
absolutely. Thank
Have a
you.
good afternoon.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.
How do we